I should have listened to the fear in my mother's voice, because that fear was the last warning life gave me. That is the first thing I remember thinking when everything fell apart. But that morning, before the darkness swallowed us, I was just a girl, breathing, laughing, believing I was safe in a world that had teeth sharper than I ever imagined. My name is Ebony, and I'm the kind of daughter who always tries to be strong for her mother. But that morning, right before Christmas, I woke to the sound of her voice trembling like a cracked drum. "Ebony, come and pray," she called. I rubbed my eyes, stood from my thin mattress, and knelt beside her. My mother, Mama Ebony, held her wrapper tightly around her chest as if it were the only thing keeping her heart from falling apart. She prayed with a trembling intensity one had never seen before. When she finished, she gripped my hand. Her fingers were cold. "Ebony," she said, her voice sharp, urgent, almost cutting, "don't follow anybody out today. No matter what. Do you hear me?" I blinked at her. "Mama, but..." "Don't argue with me," she snapped, fear flickering behind her eyes. "Even if they beg you, promise you heaven, promise you gold, say no." Her voice kept rising, pulsing like a warning drum in an empty night. I nodded quickly. "I won't go anywhere, Mama. I promise." But deep inside me, a small restless thought was already pushing her warning aside. By late morning I had washed, dressed, tied my scarf neatly, and waved goodbye. Mama stood at the door, watching me leave with a face full of dread. At school, the sun was bright, the air smelled of dust and roasted groundnuts, and my two best friends were already waiting. Nondi, loud, beautiful, always dressed like the world was her runway. And Kesai, soft-spoken but shining in her own way, her smile bright enough to warm a whole classroom. "Ebony," Nondi shouted the moment she saw me. "You're glowing today, I swear." "Fresh like market tomatoes," Kesai added with a giggle. I laughed with them, the fear my mother planted in my chest scattering like quick smoke. Then the news dropped. "Class has been cancelled," Nondi announced dramatically, her arms wide. "Until next year." My mouth fell open. "So my transport money, wasted." "Forget that," Kesai said. "We can still enjoy the day." I frowned. "Enjoy how?" "We're going to a small party," Nondi said, clapping like a child at a festival. "Just a little fun before Christmas." The word party hit me like a stone. My mother's warning echoed in my skull. "I can't," I said quickly. "I need to go home. I need to read." "Oh, Ebony," Nondi groaned. "Are you somebody's grandmother? Leave a little." "It's just for 1 hour," Kesai added softly. "Nothing serious. Just dance. Just relax." Everything inside me said say no. Everything outside me said don't embarrass your friends. "Fine," I whispered. But only for a short time. They screamed with excitement, and before I could breathe again, Depo, Kesai's boyfriend, pulled up in a shiny car, music booming like thunder. Two of his friends, Connor and Beo, leaned against the car, smiling like they owned the world. "Let's go, ladies," Depo shouted. We climbed in. I sat quietly, unease twisting in my stomach. But Nondi and Kesai were laughing, singing, full of joy. And sometimes joy is contagious, even when it leads you straight into the mouth of danger. The house we arrived at didn't look threatening. It was full of people, full of music, full of light. We danced, we joked, we forgot ourselves. After a while, Depo raised his voice over the music. "We have a special treat for you girls." And before we knew it, we were in another car, heading to a nearby hotel where a table was set beautifully with food and drinks. It felt like a celebration. It felt harmless. Looking back, I realized that evil rarely enters with a loud step. Sometimes it enters with music. Sometimes with smiles. We ate. We laughed. We didn't see the shadows closing in. Far away, Mama was calling me. Over and over. But my phone was lost under music, under chatter, under carelessness. And then everything changed. My head started to feel heavy. My vision blurred. My heartbeat slowed in a strange, dragging way. Abani. I feel dizzy, Kesai whispered before collapsing. Nandi slumped next. I clawed at the edge of the table, trying to stay awake, but the room spun faster and faster until it disappeared completely. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on cold cement. My hands and legs were tied. My breath came out shaky, trembling like it was afraid to leave my body. We were no longer in the hotel. We were in an abandoned building with broken windows and cracked walls, far from town, far from help, far from everything safe. Nandi was to my left. Kesai to my right. Both tied. Both terrified. And standing before us were Depo, Connor, and Beo. But their faces were different now, cold, empty, dead. Then an old man stepped out of the shadows, carrying knives and a calabash. His presence sucked the air out of the room. Do not shout, Depo warned. But we were already crying, helpless, trembling, drowning in fear. The old man lifted a knife. Its blade glinted like the eye of a demon. Choose a knife, he said, his voice deep, ancient, terrifying. Those who refuse will suffer. We begged. We sobbed. We shook. But begging means nothing to those who have already sold their souls. He took out a black bottle with a foul smell and forced it toward Kesai. No, please, she cried. But they held her. They poured it down her throat. Within seconds, she stiffened. Her eyes froze open. She collapsed. Dead. I screamed until my throat tore. Until my spirit cracked. And then the old man raised his knife and cut off her head. Blood filled the calabash as they chanted. My word ended. Then they turned to me. They forced the cup to my lips. I fought. I vomited. They tried again. I vomited again. I don't know how I found the strength. Maybe fear gave it to me. Maybe God pushed it back out. But I knew one thing. This was only the beginning of my nightmare. I woke with a pounding headache and a mouth that tasted like burnt metal. My body ached from the ropes biting into my skin. I tried to move, tried to remember, but everything bled like wet chalk on a blackboard. The smell of damp earth and decay filled my nose. Somewhere far away, the wind howled through broken windows, and every sound made me jump. I blinked and saw the old man watching me, his eyes cold and sharp, measuring me. Depo, Connor, and Beo stood behind him, waiting for some signal only they understood. The black bottle sat on a table near the corner, the same one that had already taken Kesai from me. Nandi was gone, her absence screamed in my mind louder than any noise in that room. I couldn't even cry anymore, the sobs had drained all feeling from me. I shivered and whispered, where are we? The old man didn't answer. Instead, he gestured to a knife lying on the ground. Its blade gleamed in the dim light like a promise of pain. I forced myself to look away. My stomach churned, but I refused to touch it. I wouldn't. Not yet. Drink, Depo said, stepping forward. His voice was quieter than before, almost calm, but there was something darker behind it, like ice spreading through water. You know what happens if you don't? I swallowed hard. My throat was raw. I shook my head, but my hands were tied too tightly to fight back. My mind raced. How did this happen? One moment, we were laughing in the car, singing along with the music. One moment, we were alive. And now, it felt like the world had ripped open and swallowed everything I loved. Please. I'll do anything, I begged, my voice small and broken. Just, please don't hurt me. Depo looked at me, his lips pressed into a thin line. Anything, he asked. I nodded so violently my head hurt. Anything, I whispered. He smiled, a thin, queer twist that didn't reach his eyes. Then maybe, you will survive. Survive. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. I wanted to scream that survival wasn't enough if I had to watch my friends die, if I had to see the darkness behind the masks of people I thought I knew. The old man stepped closer, his knives glinting in the dim light. You've been chosen, child, he said. Chosen to learn the lesson. To remember the cost of disobedience. His voice rumbled like thunder rolling across a distant sky. I felt bile rise in my throat. The ropes cut into my wrist as I tried to twist away, uselessly. My heart raced so fast I thought it would burst from my chest. I didn't mean to, please. Silence, he snapped. And just like that, the room seemed to close in around me, the shadows taller, heavier, almost alive. Time passed in broken pieces. They forced me to drink from the black bottle again and again. Each sip burned, each swallow made me gag, but they held me until it was down. My stomach ached, my head spun, and every muscle in my body screamed. I wondered, not for the first time, if I would die like Casey had, helpless, silent, a victim of people I thought I trusted. But somewhere, deep inside, a spark refused to die. That spark whispered, you cannot let them break you completely. You are still here. You are still breathing. I forced my mind onto that spark, clinging to it as if it were a lifeline. I couldn't think about Nondi, couldn't think about Kesai, at least not yet. Not if I wanted to stay alive. Hours, or maybe minutes, I couldn't tell, passed. The old man's chanting echoed, and the three men moved with mechanical precision, ropes and bottles and knives in their hands. I felt like a marionette in a nightmare, each string pulled tighter until I was certain I would snap. Then something shifted. A loud crash came from the broken window behind us, a sound sharp and sudden. The old man's head snapped toward the noise, eyes narrowing. Depot cursed under his breath, Connor and Beo tense, the first cracks in their control. I didn't wait. I pushed with all the strength I had, straining against the ropes. Pain shot up my arms, but something in me screamed fight. The spark inside me flared into a flame, and I realized, if I stayed silent, I was already dead. Amini. My own voice sounded foreign, hoarse, breaking the heavy silence. Listen to me. You will not get away with this. Depot's head turned sharply. Shut up, he barked, but my voice didn't falter. I had nothing left to lose except my life, and I had to at least try. The old man hissed, anger curling around him like smoke. He stepped forward, but the crash came again, louder this time. Something, or someone, was outside, moving. Something unpredictable. And in that moment, I realized the world outside the abandoned building might still reach us. Might still give me a chance. My chest heaved. My throat burned. My hands were raw. But I had to hold on, if only for that chance. I glanced at Nondi and Kesai, or what was left of them in my mind. They were gone, but I could honor them by surviving. By not giving in. By not letting the darkness win completely. Please, I whispered, but this time, not to them. To myself. Please, let me see tomorrow. The old man's eyes narrowed, and I saw movement behind him. The shadow outside grew larger, like a storm pushing through the night. And just like that, everything hung in fragile balance. One more misstep, one more wrong move, and it could be over. But for the first time in what felt like forever, I had a sliver of hope. A dangerous, fragile hope. And I would clutch it with every ounce of strength I had left. The shadows outside grew longer, stretching across the cracked walls like dark fingers reaching for us. My heart hammered in my chest, each beat echoing the rhythm of the fear that refused to leave. The old man's eyes flicked toward the noise again, and I noticed a flicker of hesitation in the three men, Depo, Connor, and Beo. That hesitation was a small crack, a tiny opening. And hope, however fragile, is a dangerous thing to ignore. I swallowed hard, trying to push down the nausea and the panic clawing at my throat. Every instinct screamed at me to stay calm, to wait, to watch, and yet every fiber of my being screamed fight. I clenched my fist, feeling the raw rope bite into my wrist, and whispered to myself, Abini, you are not done yet. You will not be silent. Not now. A distant crash echoed again, a loud, heavy sound that shook the dust from the ceiling. The old man hissed, and I caught the sudden tension in his shoulders. I could feel it before I saw it, the subtle shift of the room's energy. For the first time, I realized that maybe, just maybe, the world outside had not forgotten us. Then I saw him. A figure emerging through the broken doorway, a man tall, broad, moving with a strange, urgent purpose. I couldn't make out his face yet, but the sheer presence of someone entering the building, unannounced and fearless, sent a jolt through my veins. My heart surged, hope mixing with terror so quickly I nearly gagged. The old man barked something I couldn't hear. Depo, Connor, and Beo stiffened. But the figure didn't stop. He stepped closer, and then I realized he wasn't just coming in, he was coming for us. The old man hissed again, raising one of his knives. The metal glinted sharply, reflecting the dim light, but his movements were no longer fluid. They were rushed. Panicked. Vulnerable. A wave of adrenaline coursed through me. My mind cleared for the first time since the nightmare began. I looked at Nondi and Kesai, or what was left of their presence in that silent, terrifying room. I whispered a shaky promise, I will survive. I will not let this be the end. I twisted my hands violently, trying to loosen the ropes. Pain shot up my arms, sharp and white-hot, but I ignored it. My eyes were fixed on the figure, praying he would reach us in time. The old man lunged toward the doorway, knife raised, but the figure intercepted him with a sharp, commanding force. A struggle erupted, a flurry of movement, shouts, and the harsh sound of metal against metal. Depo and his friends tried to regain control, but their movements were clumsy, frantic. The longer they fought, the more I felt a flicker of opportunity. I wiggled, pulling at the ropes with every ounce of strength I had left. Pain tore through my shoulders, my wrist screamed in protest, but inch by inch, knot by knot, I freed one hand. My pulse raced, every nerve alive with urgency. I had to move, now. The figure struck the old man with a sudden, precise blow, sending him staggering back. I saw my chance. With one swift motion, I kicked at the floor to dislodge a piece of broken wood, using it to help cut the ropes around my wrist. My fingers were raw, bleeding, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Freedom was within reach, and the thought of it was stronger than any pain. Abeni, the figure shouted. His voice was deep, commanding, and filled with an authority I hadn't realized I craved. Move. Now. I didn't hesitate. I crawled, dragging my body across the rough floor, ignoring the cuts that burned along my skin. My legs were still tied, but I was closer, inching toward the door, toward the man who had suddenly become our salvation. Depo screamed, rage boiling over, but the figure was relentless. He moved with a precision that was terrifying in its calmness. One by one, he disarmed them, forcing them back toward the shadows from which they had emerged. The old man growled, circling us like a predator that had suddenly realized the hunt was no longer in his favor. I reached Nondi first. Her body was limp, but she was breathing, still alive. I grabbed her gently, whispering her name, shaking her until her eyes fluttered open. Then Kesai. Her body shuddered, but she too was alive. I felt a surge of relief so intense it nearly made me dizzy. Keep moving, the figure shouted. Don't stop until you're out. We stumbled toward him, hands finally free, legs dragging against the rough floor. Every step was agony, but every step was life. I glanced back once. The old man's eyes burned with fury, but he was alone now, the three men pinned and unable to act. The balance had shifted, and somehow, miraculously, we were winning. I couldn't speak. My throat was raw from screaming and sobbing, but I could feel my heart filling with something I hadn't felt for hours: hope. Dangerous, fragile, yet undeniable. We reached the broken doorway. Outside, the air was cold, sharp, and alive. The moon hung low in the sky, its silver light illuminating the dirt road ahead. I stumbled forward, clutching Nandi and Kesai, my arms around them as if I could physically hold back the darkness. And then I realized something terrifying. Even though we were out of that room, even though the ropes were gone and the old man and his accomplices were defeated, this nightmare wasn't over. Not yet. Because somewhere deep in the night, I knew he would be back. The memory of those knives, the black bottle, the chanting, it would follow me forever. And the faces of my friends, the terror in their eyes, would never leave my mind. We collapsed on the dirt road outside, breathing in the cold air, trembling from head to toe. The figure who had saved us stood behind us for a moment, then nodded once and disappeared into the shadows. I didn't ask his name. I didn't dare. I only whispered into the night, "Thank you, whoever you are." But the truth was, the terror didn't leave with him. It stayed with us, lingering like a shadow at the edge of my vision. The December night felt impossibly long, and I knew I had to get home, to Mama, to safety, to anything resembling normalcy. I looked at Nandi and Kesai. We had survived. But the horror we had seen, it had changed us forever. And I realized, with a shiver, that surviving was only the first battle. The real fight, against fear, memory, and what we had endured, was just beginning. The moon had moved across the sky by the time we reached the edge of town, our legs wobbling, our bodies bruised and raw. I clutched Nandi and Kesai, supporting them as best I could, even though my own strength was nearly gone. The air was sharp, slicing through our clothes, and every shadow felt alive, threatening to drag us back into the nightmare we had barely escaped. Are we safe?" Kesai whispered, her voice small and broken. I shook my head slowly. "Not completely," I admitted. The truth tasted bitter on my tongue. "But we are out. We are alive." Nandi shivered violently beside me. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, fixed on something only she could see. "Ebony. I saw them." I squeezed her hand. "I know. I saw it too." My throat tightened. "We survived, but it doesn't leave, not really." We stumbled along the road in silence, the only sound the crunch of dirt beneath our feet. My mind replayed every detail of that night, the laughter, the party, the bottle, the chanting, the knives. The old man's eyes, Depo's cruel smile, the helplessness of my friends. I felt a wave of guilt crash over me. Why hadn't I listened to Mama? Why had I gone? Every promise I had made her now felt like a lie. When we finally saw the familiar lights of our neighborhood, a fragile hope blossomed in my chest. I rushed forward, pulling Kesai and Nandi with me. We reached my mother's compound, and I pounded on the door, shouting for her. Mama Ebony appeared, her eyes wide with worry, her hands trembling. "Ebony," she cried. "I've been calling you. Where have you been? What happened?" I dropped to my knees in front of her, gasping, tears streaming down my face. "Mama, we were in danger, someone tried to," my voice cracked, and I couldn't finish. The words refused to leave my lips. She pulled me into her arms, holding me tightly. "Sure, it's okay, my child. You're safe now. You're safe." But deep inside, I knew that safe was a lie. Nothing would ever feel completely safe again. Not after the darkness I had stared into. Not after I had seen the fragility of life and the cruelty humans could inflict on one another. We told Mama as much as we could, leaving out the grotesque details that might have broken her. Kesai and Nondi clung to each other, their faces pale, their hands shaking. Mama held us all night, murmuring prayers, refusing to let go. When the sun rose, pale and hesitant, I looked out at the waking city. Life had begun again, vendors shouted in the market, children ran through the streets, and the world seemed normal. But I knew the truth, we had returned from a place where normal didn't exist. For weeks afterward, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house, every shadow in the room, made me jump. I relived that night endlessly, each detail, each scream, each fleeting moment of hope and terror. Mama tried to comfort me, but how do you comfort someone who has seen the absolute edge of human cruelty and lived to tell the story? We tried to return to school, to pretend that life had not been stolen from us for those hours. But nothing felt the same. The laughter of friends, the music of parties, the bright colors of the world, all of it had lost its innocence. We carried the memory with us like a scar beneath the skin, invisible, but constantly reminding us of what had happened. One night, I stood alone on the roof of my house, staring at the stars. The sky was the same as it had always been, vast and infinite, but somehow different. I thought of Kesai and Nondi, of the unknown man who had saved us, and of the dark presence that still lurked somewhere beyond our sight. And I realized something: fear would always be a part of me now, but so would strength. I had survived. I had fought when my body and soul screamed to give up. And even though the memory would haunt me, even though I would never be the same, I was still here. I whispered a vow into the night air, my voice small but firm. I will live. I will remember. And I will not let this darkness define me. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of the earth and the distant ocean. It touched my face like a promise, reminding me that life, fragile as it is, continues. In the end, that December had taken so much from us. But it had also left something behind, proof that even in the face of unimaginable terror, courage can survive. And as long as I drew breath, I would honor that courage, in myself, and in the memory of my friends. The nightmare had ended, but the story of survival was only beginning.